Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Timist Podcast Series. My name is James, and I am the Timist and the host of the thing you're currently listening to. This is part 2 and the conclusion of my conversation with Hamza Masood, who is the Business Development Manager for the world's most powerful watch market research platform, WatchCharts. In this second half, we go over the methodology that WatchCharts uses to track watch sales in order to ensure accuracy, as well as historical price adjustments. We also talk about the impact that the secondary market could theoretically experience given the massive growth of AI tech in various industries. Can we leverage AI and build out predictive models given the vast amount of data we already generate? And if that wasn't enough, we get philosophical and talk about our conception and understanding of value in relation to an object such as a watch. All this and more. So sit back, relax, grab a drink and a snack as we get started. The input-output aspect of the platform, of WatchCharts as a platform, fascinates me. Obviously, there's a lot of data involved, and how you gather and process sales data from different platforms is really intriguing to me, and to a lot of listeners, I'm sure, as well. How do you ensure the accuracy of the pricing listed, right? Because, you know, if folks don't know, like, you go to eBay and someone's like, you could buy it now for this amount.
Yeah.
There's the asking price, which is one thing, and then there's the selling price, which is what the thing actually sold for, right? Anyone can ask any price of anything, and it's really up to the potential buyers to decide whether they're willing to pay that or not.
Yeah.
So walk us through a bit, just because, again, the amount of data input channels is extensive, and how does one ensure that they're accurate? Because, again, this is like the New York Stock Exchange, right? Like every day things go up, they go down, etc.
Yeah. So our full methodology is proprietary, but there are some things that I can talk about that I'll get into. But before I do that, I know me saying like, oh, it's proprietary can sound like I'm trying to evade the question, which in some way I am. But I think the reason that people want to know the answer to that question is because they really want to know if they can trust the data or not, right?
Absolutely. It's
I think
it's a little bit different than like going to KFC and being like, what are the 11 secret herbs and spices, right? It's like, well, we're not going to tell you.
And what I always tell people when they ask that question is I invite you to check out the website, pick whatever watch you're interested in looking at the price for, see what price we say it sells at or trades at currently. Look at the 1 year price history that we publish for every watch. If you're a subscriber, you can see more, and see if it passes your smell test, right? And if you think that there's something just straight up wrong about the price that we're publishing, obviously, again, given all of the nuances in which, with which we characterize the price, if that passes your smell test, then I think we've done a good job. And if we can do that consistently day in, day out, and do it for, the breadth of watch references that we cover, then hopefully over time you can find yourselves believing in the prices that we publish, even if we're not 110% transparent about what goes on inside the black box. But to talk about that black box specifically, there's a few things that I can say. One is that when we publish a market price, it's based on what we know to have sold or what we infer to have sold. We're not basing our market prices off of asking prices. So if you're seeing, crazy inflated prices for listing somewhere, and it's like some large marketplace platform, and you're wondering like whether that's going to skew our prices, it's not, because we only update the price based on sales that, like I said, we either know to have occurred or infer to have occurred. And then whether we know or whether we infer is based on the source. So in some cases, the source will confirm to us that a watch has sold. So if you're buying or selling a watch on Watch Exchange on Reddit, we use the Reddit API that tells us, because people use these flags on listings, they will mark the watch as sold. On a forum like Watch or Rolex forums, people will come back to their listing and leave a comment that says sold.
So yeah.
So we have a heuristic as we're tracking and monitoring the life cycle of that listing to see whether or not the original poster ever comes back and leaves that comment. When they do, that's the time of sale. Now we know that the sale has occurred. And so we mark it as a sale and it becomes a data point for the pricing methodology. eBay, similarly, we can kind of tell. In some cases, though, for some of the sources that we track, we won't get something like that. And so what we will do is say, all right, this listing is live today. Let's say it's live on day equals 0. It's live on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. Day 6, it disappears, right? We infer it sold. But we're not going to just like leave it there. We're going to keep monitoring on days 6 through to the present day. And if at any point we see the exact same listing come back online, we will retroactively go back and update our historical data to reflect the fact that this watch didn't actually sell at the time that it first disappeared from the market. It just disappeared. So it should not be used as an input for the pricing calculation for that specific reference.
Yeah, so you don't stamp that moment in time with this
Yes.
watch in this model
No,
sold for
no.
this price.
We recompute our full price history every day. So in that sense, it's not like today's stock price is set in stone. And then like if a stock traded for $88 today, like you could come back and look at it 10 years from now and it'll still say it traded for $88 on that day, right? Like we're constantly sort of evaluating whether we have the best available data. So if let's say we got a high quality data source tomorrow that gives us data going back 10 years on 20,000 watches, like should we not use that to update our historical price estimates? We totally should. And so that's what we do. So that's why if you want to know what the market price of a watch is today, look for the price today. That's why we update daily. But if you want to know what the price of a watch was 2 weeks ago, right? Excuse me, or on a specific date, right? There is a non-zero chance that we tell you today it was X, but let's say 2 months down the line, we tell you that the price for the same moment in time was actually, I don't know, like 0.95x or something, right? Or 1.05x because we've recomputed it. So
because from today into 2 months into the future, additional data points have been gathered, and recalculating means that the number has to be adjusted because it'd be more accurate.
Yeah, we will do outlier detection. So if we see listings with crazy prices, those do not get used for the pricing calculation. We will also treat different sources with different levels of confidence in terms of like how well we can trust the data coming from them. We won't just publish an update to a market price because we've seen a ton of sales activity on, let's say, one of our sources, right? So let's say Rolex Forums was the only place that we could see 126500 Daytonas selling, right? I mean, yes, that's an input, but it's not as confidence inspiring as saying, oh, we can see this watch transacting at largely similar prices in 10 different places, right?
So there's a confidence scale. Gotcha. The first thing that pops in my mind when you say these like outliers is the auction houses.
Yes. Auction houses do not serve as inputs to, we collect auction data. We publish some of it on our website. We'll direct you to listings on the major auction houses websites, but they do not serve as inputs to the pricing calculation methodology.
Yeah, that's the first thing that pops into my mind because as a whole, I do believe that auction houses and the numbers that they generate on certain items, whether it's watches or really anything, tends to really be sensational, and it kind of gets plastered over a bunch of media outlets, and then in some respects, dealers or even potential private sellers now have this notion that, well, I have that watch, but really you don't have that watch. But I have that watch by and large, and I like that number a lot because that number is a big number. And as a person that's trying to sell something like that or similar, I'd much prefer that number versus what I initially thought my, watch was worth. So,
So stuff selling at auction can also have inflated prices because two people in the room got into a pissing contest.
yeah,
It could
except
also happen because the watch has provenance. So, okay, it's not just a Portugueser or a big pilot, it's Tom Brady's
right.
Portugueser or a big pilot, and some people are willing to pay a premium for that.
Oftentimes, though, that nuance, that context is it gets chucked right out the window though because it's sort of selective hearing. I
Yeah.
get to choose as the seller of this item. I'm going to choose to not focus on the fact that that Portugueser was Tom Brady's, but just go, you know what, Portugueses are worth, $300,000 now. And it's not. So I'm really glad to hear that the outliers, the anomalies, such as like auction houses, are uh, factored out. They don't influence
Yeah.
the graphs, let's say.
Yeah. And then the last thing that I would say on just to sort of like round out the answer
Yeah.
is each source has its own nuances. And so the heuristics we've developed are highly customized for each source. So ultimately, what we have to do is see if we can match a listing to a specific reference and then track that listing against that reference for its entire life cycle. And if and when it sells, use that as a data point to update the market price for that specific reference, right? To know whether a specific listing is for a specific watch, right? We need to know how to identify it. So sometimes that's as simple as just reading the title of the listing.
Mhm.
Other times it can be a bit more complicated. So we'll even do things like image detection for listing images to differentiate dial variants for
Oh, very
watches
cool.
where dial variants have different prices. Again, to come back to the 116500
Yep.
ceramic Daytona, black dial is not as desirable as the white dial. White dial has therefore a greater price. If we just say everything's a 116500, or oh, we're going to wait to see if somebody posts 116500 LN 0001, that just will not fly.
Yeah.
So we have to look at the images in that case to try and you know get a much higher match rate for specific watches against specific references, so we can publish that price.
That makes total sense because
Yeah,
there's nuances there that
yeah,
can really lead to quite a big delta between a black dial and a white dial.
yeah.
So, I mean, I can't help myself with so much information being generated and so many quote unquote proverbial charts being built out. I would assume that it's only a matter of time, because data over time is a thing. I would assume that it's only a matter of time that we'd see some sort of, you know, AI and predictive analytics model take shape.
Mhm.
That's where my brain goes. What are your thoughts, and how would that, like, what are your thoughts on this, potential future scenario or technology that, may exist already or might be coming down the line? And how would that, if it did come to fruition, change what the secondary market landscape looks like in your opinion?
I think that AI is only as good as the data that you feed it. And if you look at the quality of the data overall that's available on pricing specifically for watches, it is in nowhere near a state of maturity that's at all comparable to something like the car market.
Mm.
Now, the reason why that is because luxury watches are luxury objects. Nobody really cares about them, and like I said at the near the start, like they don't have any intrinsic value. Cars, people need to drive them to get to work, or they'll get fired for not showing up on time. Or if, heavens forbid, they get into an accident, they could seriously injure and or kill themselves or someone else. So the government gets involved. There's all of these laws and regulations around disclosure of data. Um, it's a much, much larger market, hundreds of billions of dollars compared to tens of billions in total for the global watch market. Um, so just the scale of the problem is I think different. The question that I would ask is, what is it that you are hoping the AI will tell you, or any sort of predictive platform would tell you that you think is an unanswered question today, to which people are looking for the answer? Because I think there's a part of me that is um, as interested, if not more, as you to know what the answer to the question is that you asked
Hmm.
me, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But I'm holding that part back because I don't know. In my mind, it's an open question. What is it that you would be able to do with the output of such a system if it were operating at a sufficient level of quality?
So I would imagine if you're a dealer, you would love to have a predictive model tell you that, hey, this watch right here, based on, some sort of previous flags that have been earmarked by purchasers of similar models, they
Hmm.
love these things. Well, this model has a lot of those ingredients. Um, expect it to be a future classic. Like cars are often, labeled as future classics.
Right.
I would imagine dealers would want to know this and then go, okay, cool. So I'm going to try to amass as many of these as I possibly can, put them in a safe, and then wait. As for a consumer, like a solo individual such as myself, I'm not in the market to do this because I don't purchase watches for selling them further down the line at a profit. I purchase them because I love them and I want them because I have lizard brain.
Right.
Uh, but I would imagine someone that might be in the market for, a few watches, one of the data points could be, okay, so out of these seven that I really like, which one is more likely to retain value in the future? And then potentially use that data output as one of the reasons as to why I'm actually gonna go for the, Black Bay Tudor 58925 because it's got a silver case and it's weird. And,
Yeah.
7 years down the line, people are gonna be like, this is a really good value. It's also made out of silver. Like those are the scenarios that kind of generated that question in my brain.
I think that um, it's possible to build a system like that. Um, in fact, if you're interested, I would suggest you to go to watchcharts.com/cog, which is the ChatGPT powered conversational agent that we built earlier this year.
Oh, dang.
You can ask it about watch prices and it'll give you answers. And the reason that we built it, but then we sort of like haven't spent more time investing in it is because what we found is that's actually not the way that watch collectors, certainly today, are thinking about learning about the market or trying to understand what's going on in the market, um, or otherwise in any way whatsoever interface with the data that we have. Um, so that's kind of what I mean when I said that like there's a difference in the level of maturity
Hmm.
in the way that data is thought about and consumed when it comes to watches compared to other products.
And just to
Um,
be clear, because I want to delineate this and make sure that it's evident. I am not saying that watch charts could do this or should do this.
right.
The thought was born out of this is a ton of data. It seems to be accurate. With enough of it, maybe we can train a model to start
Yeah.
predicting watches and their potential future values given enough time.
Yeah. And I mean there are companies out there that are operating on the basis of that thesis.
Hmm.
So we have spoken to people who are willing to make that bet and say, we have your data, we have data from other sources, we've collected a bunch of it. We believe in our ability to predict confidently on the basis of this information where we think the market is going to go. We're going to build a security around it, and then we're going to market and sell that security,
Huh.
right? Or that security is the watches themselves.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and there's more than one company out there that's trying to do something like that, where you can buy like a, they're built around concepts of like cryptocurrency and the blockchain and NFTs and fractional ownership, and some combination of all of the
Hmm.
above.
Hmm.
And for me personally, I think it's a very untested space. I'm not sure that it's very obvious um, whether you could correctly identify something today that would be worth, very many multiples of what you paid for it at some point in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're thinking about it like that, I think there's two ways to think about it. You could either say, I don't want to lose too much money,
Mm-hmm.
or you could say, I actually want this to make me money,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're thinking of it in terms of I want this to make me money, like I actually want this to generate a return in the long term, don't buy a watch.
Yep.
Because you could have, and we've done this analysis, like you could have bought a 1675 GMT Master 1, so not the GMT Master 2, which is in current production, but the GMT Master 1 back in the 70s. And let's assume you put it in the safe, you had, pristine condition, box and papers, everything set today. What you would be able to earn for it relative to what you paid for it, had you invested the same money back in the 70s in the S&P 500, you would have a greater rate of return today.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's for something like a blue chip, Rolex sports watch from the 70s, from its either most highly desired or second most highly desired model family.
Mm-hmm.
That's not even able to beat the market over the long term. So like the idea of like watches as investments is just a terrible idea.
Thank you for saying that.
Yes, please do not buy watches if you are looking to invest. It's just over the long term, it's not, and it doesn't matter whether you're doing it with Rolex or Grand Seiko or Cartier or even something like FP Journe. Nobody knows where tastes are going to be in 25 years from now. Nobody knows what's going to be popular. Nobody knows any of the other things that could change in the next 25 years that may result in these objects having far less value than you hoped they would.
But Hamza, I'll diversify and buy a smorgasbord of different watches, and then really,
sure.
truly, the answer is, well, then it's a watch, really, because whatever you'll be making on some fronts, you'll be losing on the other fronts, and you'll be robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you'll lose 10% on one and 50% on the other. So in some you'll lose like some number in the middle. But yeah, I think it's like for investment purposes, it's just like it's not a good idea. For the other use case, the other scenario, sorry, which is I don't want to lose too much money on this,
Mm-hmm.
I think is a much more negotiable position.
Mm-hmm.
Where I think how much you're okay with how much money you lose
Mm-hmm.
can be impacted to a very large degree by how fruitful and worthwhile you ultimately find the ownership and wearing experience of that watch over time.
Right. Because it doesn't necessarily just strictly boil down to that figure, right? There's
Exactly.
you
There's
extract something. There's things that you gain just through pure ownership
yeah.
and experiencing it and wearing it and the memories and intangibles that are impossible to quantify.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really like it's asking the question like when does a watch stop being a watch?
Right.
You know? It's like it is the physical object that it's always been, but it doesn't mean that to you anymore. Like your
Right.
conception of what it is just fundamentally changes. And so at that point, does it really matter to you whether you lost 30 cents on the dollar on it or 10 cents on the dollar, right?
Right.
I would posit that the answer to that question to some degree is immaterial. Now, if you still tell me that no, well, I still want to know, right? Like, what am I likely to lose the least money on? I would say, based on historical trends, if you're going to buy something and then cash out of it in the next 5 years, there's the obvious safe bets, Rolex, Patek AP, even within those brands, like specific references, look at the data, do your homework, and really question whether that's how you want to spend your money. Like based
Right.
on that thought process.
And that was one of the questions that I wanted to ask, but I decided against it because it is so obvious. It's like, oh, what are the popular watches that always seem to sell over retail? And the answer is pretty consistently the same, at least over the
Yes.
last 5 to 7 years that we've kind of noticed.
Mhm.
So, I'm not even going to go into that, but I'm glad that you still brought it up, at least to a certain point.
Yeah.
Thank you for all that. I am curious because we've been talking a lot about watch charts. What is one thing that you wish that people knew about watch charts that they didn't know? Like I will say that about a month ago, I found out that you have a marketplace where people
Yes.
can post up things to sell. And I don't know, about 15, 20 minutes ago, I found out that you have something called watchcharts.com/cog, which is the chat GPT powered goodness here that I'm going to play with it for sure after this podcast. Uh, but outside of those two things,
We
what
also
is
have a
there?
news we also have a news aggregator.
Okay. Okay.
No, it really depends on, I mean, in terms of like what I would say people don't know about, but that I think we do very well is the most recent thing that like that we've been investing very heavily on and we'll hopefully have more to share about in the future is more it just like so happens, I mean, this is more coincidental than anything.
Mhm.
Is focused on the CPO market
Mm.
where for Rolex specifically, where we're tracking very closely how that market is growing, and so for more so for business customers than the B2C offering on the
Mhm.
website. Although, of
Mhm.
course, if anyone is interested, you're more than welcome to reach out. We do already publish some information on the website, but that the nature of that information may change at some point. Um, we're more than happy to chat about it. So that's one that I would say. And then of course, like I would say the biggest one that already exists is the marketplace. So that's a combination of it's a combined feed of listings that we aggregate from other forums. So places that collectors are buying and selling between themselves, as well as first party listings. So the first party listings is where you come to WatchCharts, you log in, and you create your listing on WatchCharts, and it's hosted on the WatchCharts marketplace. If we recognize the reference, we'll suggest a market price given your inputs on what the condition is, where it's based, whether or not it comes with box and papers. So we'll give you a tailored custom, a suggested sort of listing price. We will verify with verification photos that the watch is actually in your possession. We also offer third-party identity verification through Stripe, and that's for both buyers and sellers. There's a messaging platform. You create the listing, and then you wait and see the magic happen. And we don't handle payment today. We do not handle authentication. So those are things that we may add at some point in the future. But for now, if you're used to the buying and selling experience on a forum website, then what we believe is we've built the best version of that sort of experience.
Mm.
Not least because price transparency is baked into the experience of both buying and selling. On the buying side, you'll get a price rating on the watch that tells you whether the watch is listed at a price that's higher or lower than what we think the fair market value of that watch is given its condition. And then on the sell side, if you don't know what you should list your watch for, or if you thought it's worth more than it actually is, we'll tell you so you don't like list something that's like $1,000 over where the market price really is. I'm sorry, James.
So sad.
And then sit around and wonder why nobody wants to buy it, right?
Yeah.
So it gives you some sense of like how you should be pricing if you want something to move more quickly, perhaps, or how to price if your set is in, super good condition and you have all of your service receipts and yada, yada, yada. Maybe you end up, listing a little bit higher. But um, again, the price ratings are there to indicate like if something has a high price, expect to see excellent condition, new
Hmm.
condition,
Hmm.
box and papers must be included. The watch is probably without a ding or a single scratch, and so on and so forth. And then of course, like it comes with all sorts of filters, and so you can search by brand, you can search by reference, by location, et cetera, et cetera.
I was very grateful for that because I did post up my Navitimer, and the references and the historical data came in super super handy. So and it was easy to do as well. So I'm not even plugging you or anything. I really liked it. It was fun. And at your suggestion, I was like, hey, I'm looking at selling my Navitimer. You're like, dude, we have this thing, and and
Yeah.
and you sure do have that thing, and it was really easy to use on it. So
Well,
kudos and
best of
props to you.
luck with your sale.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This actually ties in nicely to what what I kind of been itching to ask you for a while now. So given everything that we've discussed, um, truthfully, how much of your personal buying decisions are based on watch charts data? Because like the analytical side versus the passion driven, like we talked about, like the
Hmm.
lizard brain. Like I prefer to say like the heart wants what the heart wants side,
Yeah.
right? So resale value be damned. How much of or how many of your purchases are done, you know, truthfully, truly based on WatchCharts data that you have at your fingertips? Because I'm
Yeah.
assuming you don't have to pay for a subscription, right? Being employee number three. But how are your decisions made now based on all the info that you have on hand versus like, you
Yeah.
know what? I don't care. I know I'm going to take a hit on this watch. I just love it.
Yeah.
How do you roll
So
it?
I would say two things. One, I do every now and then for my own collecting purposes, um, look up information on the website. But when I'm doing that, I am not looking up any data that any other user on the website wouldn't be able to access. So there's no like, oh, actually, let me go check query the database to see like, is there any extra information we have on this that we haven't already published on the website,
Of course,
right?
yeah,
Something like
yeah.
that. Like, so there's nothing like that. But yes, I think for me as a collector, I think if I wasn't already working at the company, I would find myself occasionally coming back to it for both the pricing and then also just for catalog discovery and exploration. Because
Mm-hmm.
there's 27,000 watches on the website, right? There's not a lot of places where you can just go through an experience that lets you set a bunch of filters and then see what comes up and see if you can discover anything new and interesting that you may not have known about before. Let's say you want to see all two-tone watches between 35 and 37 degree, millimeters in case diameter from some random assortment of brands that are priced between $2,000 and $5,000,
Mm-hmm.
right, on the secondary market.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Let's not get into that, but let's say like that's the crazy query you want to
Sure.
run,
Yeah.
right? We have an experience that lets you see, okay, you came back with 17 watches. Six of them I knew about. 11 are brand new discoveries. Very interesting. I feel like I
Mm-hmm.
learned something, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that sort of experience, I would say I still have. And then the second thing that I would say is for me personally, where I am in my collecting journey at this point, the things that I am after that are on my short list um, are either vintage or only available at retail. So in both cases, I can't really use the service. I can't use it for vintage because we primarily focus on modern pre-owned. So the watches that I want are from the late 50s and one is from 1960. And then I'm looking for like specific variations on very specific references
Mm-hmm.
in certain condition parameters. So there's maybe like a handful of people around the world who stock those and sell those and know how to source one. And so it's really like it's so highly specialized that it really like the way to solve the problem is to go talk to those people. Um, and then if it's at retail, it's just not available on the secondary market,
Yeah.
then the service is useless.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I have watches listed on the marketplace right now that I am trying to move. So I wonder um whether or not I would have used that or if I may have gone to something like Reddit
Mm-hmm.
or not. Um, but certainly knowing what I know about the company, I feel very comfortable sort of using our marketplace experience to try and move those watches.
Very cool. Well, you've done it, Hamza. I asked you a ton of questions and you survived a podcast episode with
I
me.
did, yes.
As a honest thank you, I'd like to offer you an opportunity to talk about something that you feel passionate about or something you'd like to shine a light on. This could be quite literally anything from a local nonprofit to a great movie that you just watched that you just can't stop thinking
Mhm.
about and just want to share it with us. The floor is yours, good sir.
Um, my first thought was to pitch Tipsim to your listeners and viewers, but you literally just had him on, so I would just tell people to go watch that instead. Matt is a friend of mine. My own personal Tipsim that I bought from him over 2 years ago at this point has been in that time easily my most worn watch.
Awesome.
Um, I love that thing. I have an irrational obsession with it. just like in terms of like the product design choices that he made, I absolutely love everything about the watch. And then of course the personal story makes it all the more special. Um, I will leave the other reference as that documentary
Mhm.
that I mentioned near the start of this discussion
Mhm.
around watches that maybe at this point, like you'll flash the URL to where to
Oh, I
find it
will.
on the
I
screen.
most definitely will.
And right here. And and then yeah, hopefully included in the show notes. So I thoroughly enjoyed watching that. When it came out, we organized a live streaming um, at the premiere
Nice.
for local Red Bar members. And we got a bunch of people from the local watchmaking school, the local NAWCC chapter, and then of course, Red Bar members themselves show up and attend, and it was just a lovely experience. And it's also just like if you wonder why people can fall in love with watches and watchmaking, I would recommend that you watch it. It's very well
Heck yeah.
made.
I appreciate that, and thank you for sharing that. And yeah, plus one on Matt from Tipsum. He was an absolute joy and a sweetheart to talk to. He shared so many interesting tidbits from within the watch industry. As a collector, as a small business owner,
Yeah.
as a watchmaker, and all the things that kind of coalesce in between the different layers that we just listed out, plus the fact that he's an architect. It was fantastic. Tell me and tell the people what's the best way for the people to actually find you and your work.
So on the web, you can find us at watchcharts.com. That's WATCH and then CHARTS.com. On Instagram also, it's at watchcharts. And then my personal Instagram page is Gharyan, which is GHARIYAAN, which is watches translated, the word watches translated into Urdu. I was born and raised in Pakistan, and so Urdu is my mother tongue, and that's what you call watches in Urdu.
I love it. I never asked you about it, but today I learned.
Yeah, now you know the Fifth Wrist Gang, which is another group of collectors that I talk to often online. One of the guys in the group like turned it into calling me Gary Ann. So whichever pronunciation you find easier. But yeah, that's where the word comes from.
I love it. I love it so much. Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you for sharing. Hamza, thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing your
Absolute
stories.
pleasure.
You've been an absolute joy to spend some time with, and I appreciate you giving us your precious time. So thank you for that. Do you have any questions for me or parting thoughts you want to leave us with?
Yeah, just watches are magical.
Hmm.
And we can talk about, and we did spend a bunch of time talking about like things around them, but nothing really beats ultimately the experience of holding one close to your ear,
Hmm.
hearing a tick, turning it over, seeing the balance wheel swing back and forth, the pallet fork switch back and forth, flip back and forth, all of the wheels turn, and just marvel at the ingenuity that made it all possible and look as beautiful as most movements do through case backs while doing that. Um, it gets me every time.
Well said. I am with you and fully back up everything you just said. I also feel like you're a secret romantic, but maybe we'll talk about that in the next episode that we're
We'll talk
shooting
about
together.
that after we stop recording.
Yeah. Maybe we'll do that. Yeah. I also believe that there's a lot more meat on the bone to talk about Grand Seiko, and also we didn't really touch up a ton on all the involvement that you have here in the local Seattle chapter of Red Bar. So I think we should definitely come back and do this again if you're willing to do so.
Happy to be back.
I appreciate you. Well, I hope you enjoyed your time with us, Hamza. I'm looking forward to doing this again with you in the future. Everyone, thanks for spending some time with us. Please show your support and check out Watch Charts on Instagram at Watch Charts or online at watchcharts.com. Give them a follow, send them your questions, and maybe tell them that the time has sent you.
Subscribe.
And cut. That concludes this episode of the Timist Podcast Series. A sincere thank you for hanging out with us. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, then please push all the buttons that will help you hear more of us in the future. If you'd like to continue the conversation, you can either drop a comment on the associated YouTube video or reach out to me on Instagram at TheTimistIG. Thanks for listening. I'm The Timist. Be well, and I'll catch you in the next one.